Alrighty, we'll just give a minute or so. It looks like people are starting to join pretty rapidly now. Hello, happy Hanukkah, and welcome to this afternoon's learning event. We're happy to have our Partnering for Vaccine Equity learning community members and others who are also working on vaccine equity join us for today's conversation. My name is Eric Wengel. I'm a member of the team organizing group learning for our community. And on behalf of our team at the Urban Institute, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to continue our social media event series today. We hosted the first event of this series on November 8th, and that was focused on how to harness social media to effectively share your messages about vaccines with adults in the communities you're working with. And if you were unable to attend, those materials have already been posted on the Learning Community website, along with a recording. The second event of the series was held on November 18th on identifying and combating misinformation. For many, if not all of you, I'm sure that social media platforms are a big way that you're trying to get your messages out. However, as I'm sure we all know, attacks on social media are fairly commonplace. Today, we are fortunate to have experts to guide us through this and how best to protect ourselves and move forward to get your message out. Before we go further, I'm going to do a typical overview of how this session will work, so I apologize if you've heard this before. We have begun offering live interpretation from English to Spanish during our events. If you would like to listen to the Spanish language channel, simply click on the globe icon in the Zoom taskbar at the bottom of your screen. You all have been muted upon entry into this session. There are a lot of us, so staying on mute unless you are speaking is key to keeping the discussion going without accidental interruptions. You do have the opportunity to speak your question rather than type it into the Q&A. It's your choice. If you want to speak your question, use the raise hand feature and we'll unmute you. If you do want to type your question, use the Q&A tab to do this, and you can ask a question at any point during the session, although we will tend to answer them at the end. The chat room feature is also open today, and we encourage you to chat amongst yourselves as you'd like. But please use good chat room etiquette. By this, I mean do not post questions for the speaker in chat because it might be hard for us to see them there. And though this probably goes without saying, please be civil to one another and to our speaker while chatting. Finally, as with all of our learning events, we will post the slides and a recording of this event on our community website and circulate them through the digests that go out through the CDC-managed Adult Vax Program listserv, which all program members should be a part of. And if you have any technical difficulties at any point during the session, please send an email to our community manager's inbox, vaxequitylearning@urban.org, which is on the screen below there. We'll be watching the inbox and we'll try to help you as quickly as we can. Next slide, please, Zara. One more. Thank you. And then with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speakers for the day. Our first speaker today is Erica Bonnevie, and she is the Director of Research at the Public Good Projects, a nonprofit organization that performs public health monitoring and behavioral change communication. She has experience managing health communications and conducting research across diverse settings, including Central Asia, England, East Africa, Mexico, and across the United States. She has managed research projects on a variety of topics, such as childhood obesity, substance use, reproductive health, maternal and child health, gender-based violence, and infectious disease. Next, we have Dr. Joe Smizer, PGP's Chief Executive Officer, who has worked at the intersection of public health and marketing throughout his career. He has designed core strategies for several of the United States' largest behavior change campaigns, the largest campaigns to date for the US CDC and FDA. Additionally, Dr. Smizer has worked with the United Nations, USAID, multiple state and local health departments, Google, Facebook, Twitter, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, Direct Relief International, and the Peace Corps. Dr. Smizer is a leading proponent of integrated marketing strategies for behavior change, as well as the need for outside-the-box public-private partnerships. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Todd Wolin, who's a board-certified pediatrician and an international board-certified lactation consultant. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of Kids Plus Pediatrics, a large pediatric practice in the Pittsburgh area. When he's not seeing his patients at Kids Plus, Dr. Wolin continues to build his reputation as a national expert in immunizations, breastfeeding medicine, pediatric sleep issues, and practice management. His practice weathered a fierce online attack by anti-vaxxers after posting a pro-vaccine video. He's also founded Shots Heard Around the World to help other professionals through similar attacks. And I just want to thank all of our speakers for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, Erica, I will hand things off to you.
Great, thanks. So on the next slide, so in this presentation, I'll give you all a general overview of the Project Vector system. Some of you may already be Project Vector users, while this may be new information for others, but just as an overview for people who aren't as familiar, Project Vector is a system that tracks and identifies vaccine-related media conversations across the United States. As we all know, vaccine misinformation is one of the top threats to public health. So in response to this, starting in June of 2019, PGP began collecting publicly available media data about vaccines. Data that we collect into our system are based on a keyword search query that contains hundreds of terms and phrases related to vaccines, which is constructed and managed by PGP's public health analysts and journalists. The Project Vector system operates 24 hours a day, collecting, organizing, and coding data. And since the project began, we've collected over 380 million conversations about vaccines, and that number grows by the second. So Project Vector's monitoring presents and summarizes conversation both at the US national level, as well as within all of the 50 states. Project Vector is a free resource. It's designed for health organizations, health educators, or members of the press who report on public health. It is not open to the public. So for more information and to request access to the system, you can visit projectvector.com, which is on the slide here at the bottom. On the next slide. So since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a huge increase in mentions of vaccine opposition and mis and disinformation. When we look at our data from 2019 to 2020, we were seeing about 5,300 conversations per day, which includes posts, comments, and shares, things like that. In the last year, from 2020 to 2021, this has increased to an average about 25,000 in the past year. So we see a massive increase in opposition and misinformation. We have a chart here on the slide at the right that shows trends in themes within conversations about vaccines. So as you can see, negative conversations about vaccines, which we include opposition and mis and disinformation shown in the green line, have increased steadily over time. And when we look at what drives some of those largest spikes in conversations, we've seen that the increases kind of previously have been driven mostly by the various vaccine authorizations and approvals. And then we see that final spike being driven by vaccine mandates, in particular, the Biden administration's vaccine requirement for employers. So we've seen this trend over time. Conversations that perhaps a year ago were initially sowing doubt in the safety and vaccine development process are now shifting to incorporate a focus on mandates and regulations. And this new focus is one of the reasons why Project Vector has recently placed a new emphasis on understanding conversations about legislation and advocacy against vaccine regulations. On the Project Vector site, we have a new section that's dedicated to reviewing conversations about each individual vaccine or advocacy effort across the US. And so I think this is just one of the ways that we are constantly trying to improve Project Vector to reflect the changes in conversations about vaccines that we've seen over the past 2+ years of our monitoring. In the upcoming few months, we will also be incorporating monitoring of Spanish language vaccine misinformation as well. So there are a lot of new updates to the Project Vector system that are to come. On the next slide, part of Project Vector is each week we provide insights on the top themes and topics in vaccine opposition and misinformation over the previous week. These are 3 examples of some of the misinformation that Project Vector has been tracking in November. Perhaps unsurprisingly, COVID-19 vaccines in children have really been a focus of misinformation and conversation, particularly since the start of the school year, as well as the expansion of vaccines to children ages 5 and up. We've also seen claims circulate that there have been changes in children's vaccine formulations, as well as a renewed focus on unapproved treatments for COVID-19 after an unvaccinated NFL player's diagnosis. These 3 are just some examples of what we report on each week through our insights. The insights themselves will reference misinformation and opposition, but will also provide a lot of context and background to the stories. so that our Project Vector users can easily digest the most important information that's trending in their areas. And before I end, I also wanted to mention that Project Vector is also the platform behind PGP's misinformation alerts, which are featured on the Public Health Communications Collaborative website. And we have the link here on the slide. So on this site, our health communications experts and journalists review trending COVID-19 vaccine misinformation, and we provide strategic communications guidance for how to respond to that misinformation. For example, if a story requires a direct response or a passive response and what you should say, what talking points should be, or if something does not require a response at all. So for more information on that communications guidance, you can view that link above, and that is free and open to the public for anyone. And that is it. That is my portion of the presentation on Project Vector.
Okay, great. And I think this is, I think it goes to me to introduce our next speaker. Once again, I'm Dr. Joe Smizer. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. We're really lucky. We have a great speaker with us. Dr. Taiwo Lin not only is a pediatrician and the chief executive officer of a large pediatric practice based in Pittsburgh, many years experience as a pediatrician, a lot of knowledge in that space, but that's only half of the reason he's here with us today. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for us, because we get to learn from his experience, in 2017, his pediatric practice released a pretty basic PSA about the benefits of the HPV vaccine. That led to a prolonged and very coordinated attack by anti-vaxxers that lasted for weeks upon weeks and led to his practice and his partners, his staff, really figuring out how to handle this situation when it arises. What was it really like to be on the receiving end of hundreds and thousands of people who have you in their crosshairs? At the time, that was really rare. That was pretty unheard of for healthcare and public health to have that level of negative action taken against you and your organization. Fast forward to today, unfortunately, it's much more common. And that's why Dr. Wolin has become a very well recognized speaker, both here in the US and internationally, helping organizations understand what it's like and then what to do about it when you or your organization are being attacked by anti-vaxxers and other coordinated groups of individuals and organizations. That is what led them. What came out of the silver lining of that experience was we got a great initiative called Shots Heard, which is, as you heard earlier, physicians helping physicians, sharing resources when they do come under attack. There's a lot we could talk about there, but I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Dr. Wolin. And again, just we're lucky to have him, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this talk.
Well, thank you, Joe, for the introduction. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Erica, for talking about Project Vector, which I think is super awesome. I'll just summarize what it was like to be attacked. It sucked. That's what it was like. It was really a bummer. But yes, we learned a lot about it, and I hope to share lessons learned and as part of this whole coalition, share resources and thoughts and strategies that can help you. So the talk's name is Vaccination Communication. It's actually something that's super important and something that PGP, particularly through Project Vector and Stronger, are just amazing at. And it's something that doctors aren't amazing at. We're not trained in communication. We're trained in diagnosing things. We're trained in prescribing things. We're not particularly great in communication, and that's a problem. And that's one that we're still trying to make up for. So one thing that we have that's really super important, next slide. So this is a slide showing you a trust index, and it's showing you that nurses, when asked nationally and even internationally, and physicians are at the top of the trust list. And then below that, in the middle of this kind of continuum, further down is Sith Lord, if you're a Star Wars fan. And below that is Member of Congress. They're pretty low on the trust list. Healthcare professionals in general are actually very trusted in our nation and in our communities. But the question would be, what do we do with that trust? And I think we squander it a lot. As a matter of fact, if you break physicians down by specialty, pediatricians go right up to the top with nurses. So go pediatricians. Next slide, please. So this is a continuum of what pediatricians have, which is incredibly powerful, which is this longitudinal relationship with families. I see families in our practice, we see kids, we used to only see them to 18, now we see them to 21, but if they have younger siblings, I may see them for two decades or more. Then if their kids have kids, and I'm getting old enough because I've been in practice for over 25 years, I'm seeing kids of kids that I saw. And our senior partner, who is a founder of the original practice, is seeing kids of kids of kids. So, but what is that? What is the value of that trust? Well, we have a growing body of evidence that shows, even in the face of hesitancy, that when given a strong, clear recommendation to do something, in this case, vaccinate, people who are hesitant, 3/4 of them will still vaccinate on the same day, even if hesitant, when immersed in this relationship. The problem with this relationship, right, is that one, we're not trained in talking to families particularly well. So we need to have better one-on-one training face-to-face. But the bigger problem is, even if you're good talking to somebody face-to-face, how quickly and how much can you scale that up? On a busy day, maybe we see 20 or 30 patients, though not every one of those is a vaccine communication. So you can't really scale that up. And so we have to think about how do we get around that problem? Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, if I had to boil pediatrics down, I think what we do every day is behavior change. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's very different than many other professions. If you're a banker, you're trying to convince people to invest or put money with you. If you're a car salesperson, what do I need to do today to get you to drive away in one of our cars today? Right? We're all trying to figure out behavior change. Next click, please. But these are the things we're trying to change behavior on, right? We know that most health and unfortunately impacts to worsen health are behavior related. I need to try and convince people to eat a bigger plant-based diet, or to use sunblock, or to wear seatbelts, or if they have firearms, to store them and separate the ammunition. These are things I have to do every day, and it's tons of things. How many of those things can I do effectively in the context of a 10 or 15-minute visit when the sibling of the patient is crying, the parent's late to get somewhere else, and I still have a ton of documentation to do? So I need to be wiser and smarter, and I can still affect change very powerfully face-to-face, but I have to be really careful because my time is limited. So I have to think about how to better communicate. Next slide, please. So on this slide, there's a picture of a door, and the open door says 365 days, which is on the outside of the door. And it talks about the 2 healthcare communication fallacies inside the room, right? Because here's one of the communication fallacies. Click, please. The first is that we have to impart all of our healthcare wisdom to families while they're inside the 4 walls of the exam room. And as I said, that time is precious. It's oftentimes with multiple competing priorities. So why do I have to impart all my wisdom in the 4 walls of the exam room? I think that is clearly a healthcare fallacy, one that we haven't yet learned to start teaching people in medical school or in nursing school or in any of the health professions, student training programs, all the way up to residents, all the way to attending physicians. This is not the only way to communicate. That is a complete fallacy. And actually, I would argue it's probably not the best way. Next slide, please. Next click, which is that you will be believed. And obviously, we know you aren't always believed now because of the amount of disinformation. So the first rules around communication is know who your audience is. Our audience are typically parents of young kids and sometimes older kids. But the second rule is know how to reach them. And it sure as heck isn't just in this exam room. As a matter of fact, Generation Y and Z are here, right? This is where they're at. This is where they get their information. As a matter of fact, they're very information savvy, and they want their information when they want it, where they want it, how they want it. And that is oftentimes sure as heck not in your exam room, though sometimes when they're in there, they have these open, but it's always when around their schedule. And it's also with the notion of they want their information sent to them. It's curated based on what they like. They want you to push information to them. That's social media. If I like something, I'm allowing you to push things into my feed. That's different than pulling information, which is old school, checking a newspaper, looking up something in the yellow pages. But it's nowadays, a millennial will tell you, going to a website and going and putting a word into a search engine is kind of laborious. You have to pull that information down, whereas they'd rather stuff be pushed to them. Next slide, please. So why in the world wouldn't we be using the most powerful communication tool ever known? We know that this tool has been used in incredibly powerful ways, sadly, to basically lead people astray on how to stop a pandemic and to accept a vaccine and to mask. But why aren't healthcare professionals using this tool? And there's lots of reasons. They'll tell you, oh, I don't want to be sued, or what if somebody says something bad about me? And they have lots of reasons. But the point is, it's 2021. This is no longer negotiable. We should be here. Next slide, please. And here's a graphic showing you recent research showing you the change in Americans who have a social media profile, which in 2008 was only 10%. And by 2021 had gone up close to 80%, 79%. So when I talk to audiences in grand rounds and national webinars and international meetings, particularly pediatricians always think I'm like throwing them a curveball. I say, if you make hats and 90%, you do market research and 90% of people out there say, I like a red hat. What color hat should you make if you're a hat manufacturer? They're like, is this a trick question? No, it's not a trick question. If 90% of your people say they want red hats, make red hats. If 80% of your people are on social media, you better be on social media to talk to them, because if you're not, you're creating a vacuum. And when you create a vacuum, it gets filled with crap. And that's what it's filled with in many ways. Next slide, please. So this is what an hour of face-to-face time would look like. Actually, that wedge is too big. It's a tiny sliver. I had to make it visible for you, but actually it's not even that big. And the truth is, as healthcare providers and as public health conduits who are trying to put out good information, we don't get that much face-to-face time. But how can we leverage that? Well, we can use the most powerful communication tool. Next clip, please. Which is what these companies do. And that's Nike and Apple and McDonald's and Disney and Amazon, right? They know that their time and money invested into social media, next slide, or next clip, please, changes behavior. Next clip, one more time. So communication can change behavior, and social media is a tool to change behavior. It can overthrow governments. It can change trends and make people dance a special dance that day, but it can have amazing health implications, both positive and negative. Why, again, are we not teaching our health and public health professionals and organizations on how to use it effectively? Next click, please. Sadly, we are seeing what negative anti-public health messages have resulted in. And this has led to anti-vaccine or anti-vitamin K, anti-mask, anti-fluoride. These have really come along in a way that have harmed millions. Next click, please. They use really tactics that allow them to morph into whatever they want, so they can target minorities and be xenophobic or be anti-science in general, or anti-climate change. Next click, please. And they're very sophisticated in the way that they do this. Humans don't make decisions based on intellect, not often. We are driven very much by our emotions and our beliefs, and that can be triggered very quickly when we believe there's threat. And that is what kind of anti-critical thinking, anti-science, and anti-vaccine social media does. They use fear, which is one of the strongest drivers for decision-making. It results in us sharing and liking and making things go viral. There's a paper out called Ampligandia by Renee DiResta in The Atlantic that talks about how we contribute to this. When we see something that scares us, we share and like it so we get the word out without even verifying if that information is accurate. But they use things like distrust, they stir in hate, and they can make disinformation incredibly powerful. And in fact, what they do is they weaponize these platforms to spread this disinformation. And as you just saw even earlier on, Erica showed you, we're not really keeping up yet with what the anti-vaccine and anti-science community is doing. Next slide, please. So this is basically the continuum pre-pandemic of what was the data show both nationally and internationally, that 3/4 of the population is vaccine accepting. If I make a recommendation in the office and say, today, Mrs. Jones Sally needs her TDAP, her HPV, and her meningitis, she'll say, yep, go ahead and give it. 23% is described as hesitant. And I make these shapes, they're kind of bubbles, 75% kind of tapering down into this like long, thin 23%. And I believe those people can flow back and forth between accepting or more hesitant. Now, it's only really 1 to 2% that are truly anti-vaccine. But the problem here is that there is continued day-to-day forces pushing people more toward a hesitant side. And while that face-to-face relationship we have with families, maybe an hour a year, is powerful, we need to even make that more powerful, but we also have to counteract that 24/7, 365 anti-science, anti-vaccine message. Next slide, please. So at Kids Plus, we've really worked hard to do this, and we've done so by getting a story out, and we've had lots of national coverage. You can click 3 times, please. So we've been in documentaries, on the cover of the New York Times and Science Times, lots of 4 academic publications, and 2 more clicks, please, and webinars, as well as podcasts as well, and 1 more click, please. And this has resulted in us getting into People magazine. So whether I was in an academic publication or the cover of the LA Times or Science Times, New York Times, this apparently had a lot more sway on relatives and our patients. 1 click, please. So we were on page 77, 1 more click, please, but we gave the cover to Ricky Martin because we were feeling generous. Point being is that we had a story to tell, and the story is somewhat what Joe referred to, which was the attack that we suffered. I think that we weren't just lucky, though. We created our own luck by really championing the idea of becoming communication experts. Next slide, please. We did that by hiring the person that you saw on the cover of People with Me, which was Chad Herman, our communications director. And this is where he lives, which is within Evidence-Based Studios, which is very odd. I don't know of any other practice that's a private practice that built out a full production studio. But as you can see, we can podcast, we do video communication, and we create content for pretty much every platform, whether it's your phone, your tablet, or if you just want to listen on a podcast. We don't believe that this is going to be the solution for everybody, nor should it be. But guess what this is in my hand again? It's that darn smartphone. And everything we do in that studio, you can do on your smartphone. And if you don't believe me, just find your closest teenager who can make videos and podcasts and do amazing things. People have shot full-length films on their smartphones. You can do everything we do there. It's just that we decided, years ago that we wanted to build a production studio, but you don't need one to be powerful in communication. Next click, please. This is that video that Joe was talking about. We pushed it out on August 23rd. It was called We Prevent Cancer. It was just to promote the HPV vaccine because the CDC was saying the uptake was poor, which it was. It was like 30–40%. And so next click, please. Within 3 weeks, we had 15,000 views and people calling us and saying, hey, I want to get my kid the vaccine, because we had all of our providers do short snippets of, it only takes 1 touch 1 time. This can cause cancer, right? This is preventable. And that was the effect we wanted it to have. Unfortunately, 3 weeks later, it got dropped into an anti-vaccine group. Next click, please. That drove it up into a viral level of 105,000 plus views, but it also brought on that onslaught of the attack. Next slide, please. This is what that attack looked like. And it was a 6-day attack involving over 800 different accounts who posted over 10,000 times to our page with atrocious vitriol and hate and threats. So yes, that can happen, and that's a bummer. But that blue arrow represents when the reinforcements started to arrive. And being a fairly well connected practice, we put the word out for help, and reinforcements arrived. And anti-vaxxers and anti-science people were pretty much bullies. They like to pick on a soft target. And when we started getting reinforcements, particularly big groups like AAP had some people come to us, the Physician Moms Group, which was amazing. They arrived with data and explicatives. videos. And when the bullies started getting pushed back, they just kind of went away. And you could see very quickly the attack died down. Next slide, please. So this is the, and they also went after our, the social media platforms allow themselves to be weaponized. So in this case, Google was the worst. And we had, one more click, please. Fraudulent reviews that lasted close to a year. And it wasn't until we went to the media and had The Guardian thankfully wrote an article on us that the last third of fraudulent reviews were removed. So imagine we had a close to a 5-star review, and after we got attacked, we had less than a 1-star, and Google does nothing. And this is why I will continue to shame them publicly every chance I get. They've allowed their platform to be weaponized so that they could damage people. Imagine if you would allow, you're a taco stand. Today you go up and you say, let's see, I want to eat tacos. And there's a 5-star taco stand there and a 1-star taco stand there. I bet you're not going to the 1-star taco stand website and saying, well, let me see if these are fraudulent reviews. You're just going to go somewhere else. That is true power. And they've allowed their platform to be weaponized, and they do very little about it. So I'm going to just shame them again. Next click, please. So this is the way that the anti-science and anti-vaccine community works. They have 2 ways of really attacking health. One, in disinformation campaigns, huge volumes, they amplify the message, and it's sensational content, so it rides the wave of the algorithms. But the second one is the antidote, right? Remember all that stuff I told you in the beginning was trust is the antidote. We can overcome disinformation and distrust. But now if you start to speak up and your message resonates, you are targeted very quickly, and they harass and they threaten, and now they can harm you, as I showed with reputation harm using Google and Yelp and things like that. Next click, please. So we knew, okay, I'm sorry, one more click. We knew, and you can click 3 more times, that being victimized was terrible, that we weren't going to be the last victim, that better resources were needed right away, and that we knew even big, huge multi-million-dollar systems were being silenced by the threat of being attacked on social media. Next click, please. So this is where we fought back. One more click, please. And what we fought back with was with research, creating a toolkit, a digital cavalry, which is now over 2,000 vetted members internationally. They're like, we're like light the signal fires of Gondor, if you like Lord of the Rings, and the riders of Rohan will come to your aid real time. And they push back on those bullies who then leave. And we have lots of documented cases of this working. And you saw the awareness campaign with all the places where we've told our story. Next click, please. So this is what the anti-vax and anti-science community tries to do. They swarm you, they try and overwhelm you, they try and scare you, and now they try and do some reputation harm. Next click, please. This is why we went on to fight back and ultimately form the nonprofit Shots Heard, which is now run by Public Good Projects, which is to help reinforce and strengthen, to defend, and to empower and embolden and galvanize people that have a pro-science, pro-vaccine message to get the message out there, because you have a team at your back and you have a toolkit that I'm going to talk about to help guide you. You can learn how to prepare and defend and move forward even if you are attacked. Next click, please. And so I'm proud to say that we found a place to hand off Shots Heard, and one more click, please, which is into the Public Good Projects portfolio regarding vaccines. Now, they do several public health different initiatives, but they have an amazing foundation here for really powerful work to help fight the anti-vaccine movement. Erica already spoke about Project Vector. Stronger.org talks about fighting disinformation against science and medicine and vaccines. And now Shots Heard provides that kind of defense of people that are going to speak up, and really empowering resource there. Next click, please. So the narrative that we're not telling, one more click, please, is the story behind why the anti-vaxxers and anti-science people are doing what they do, because they'll tell you it's altruistic, or, you know, we're here for your freedom, or to keep toxins out of your body. But in fact, one more click, please, they're always, if you trace behind it, one more click, please, there's profits, there's politics, and there's an attempt to gain power by pushing disinformation. That's the ulterior motive. That's the story we need to tell. We need to weave narrative. Storytelling is amazingly powerful. Healthcare providers get up here and talking about confidence intervals and very sophisticated technology, when in fact, we should really be able to tell a story of patients who suffered or were protected by certain initiatives that we were able to put forth, and how this group, the anti-vax community or anti-science community, is actually in it for the money, or to get pander for votes, or to try and gain power by scaring and harming people. Next click, please. This is one study, one more click, please, that came out in 2020 showing the breakdown of anti-vaccine groups versus pro-vaccine groups. And in that picture, there's a cluster of red dots that represent anti-vaccine groups within social media. They're scattered throughout the kind of social media landscape here on Facebook, whereas the blue dots are more consolidated and they're actually becoming the echo chambers. And what happens is, unfortunately, that the anti-vaccine groups are kind of culty and they weave themselves into your Facebook running group and your Facebook crochet group and your Facebook whatever, baking or cooking group. I mean, they are everywhere. And as soon as they sensed doubt, or they themselves introduced doubt, they use a notion called tribalism. Since they're already in your running group, you tend to already trust them. You've never met them, but they're in your group. And if they say something, it's a little fringe, but you're like, I'll listen to them a little more. You already give them some credence and you give them some degree of trust, which again, we can overcome with real trust, but we got to be out on these platforms. And as you can see, we're not. And the red line overlapping the blue line and now growing faster that you see in 2030, 2035 is showing you that right now, if we don't change things, anti-vax social media will overtake the pro-vaccine message that's out there. We really need to make a change. And this paper was in Nature by Johnson. Next slide, please. This is one more very cool study that came out in 2019. It was called inoculation theory. This is really cool, which is if you reach people with good information, accurate information before they get exposed to disinformation, you can pre-bunk or actually get rid of the myth before they get it. So when then they're exposed to the myth, they actually, the myth doesn't take hold the way that it normally would if they weren't first prepared. The other thing is, even if the myth has taken hold, as I've already told you, we can overcome it. It's harder, but yet another reason why we need to be out there so people hear us. And they know me already, right? And again, you don't have to be viral and big 2 continents away, but if I get big in my region in Western Pennsylvania, they know me from food drives or maybe a house of worship or maybe a community event or seeing me in the office or seeing me on local media. We have to build upon that and fortify that and build upon it with social media presence. Next click, please. So basically, this is all about building up our digital footprint, and it has to be everywhere in an exact change. Next click, please. So this is what I was, and again, patient engagement, patient education. Yeah, that's fine. Next slide, please. So this is what we talked about, helping to prepare, defend, and move forward after an attack. And this is the toolkit on Shots Heard. We were proud to get the first version, but more exciting now is that Public Good Project was able to take it to the next level. It's now been translated into Spanish and French and Portuguese. And it's been downloaded tens of thousands or more. I don't even know the most current data, but let's click forward one more time. And here we can see that it helps you to prepare and avoid attacks, how to have reinforcements ready, teaching you about how to Google yourself, how to really make sure your ducks are in a row so that you're less vulnerable. This is really the prepare piece of it. And again, free, downloadable. All you have to go to is shotsheard.org and you will get this toolkit for free in multiple languages. Next click, please. This is the defend piece, right? So this is really making sure that, preparing yourself mentally, that if you're attacked, you can overcome and you're not alone. The isolating and being swarmed is the scariest part. And when you have a team at your back, and you can go ahead and join Shots Heard by going to their website and already be part of the team. But if you're not part of the team and get attacked, or you see somebody getting attacked, we still come to their aid. So you check out the website, but this will, again, in the toolkit, let you know how to notify us. Don't engage with attackers. A lot of us being very public health oriented want to talk to them and kind of set them straight and say, no, you have misinformation. If somebody's there in goodwill and wants to have a true conversation, that's one thing, but you can quickly identify people that are just out there to drain your resources or to just be straight up mean to you. It tells you about all these other tactics you can do or strategies to do to avoid their tactics. Next click, please. And then how to move forward from the attack. Click again, please. A lot of this is self-care. It can be very scary. You can feel violated when somebody tells you you're a baby killer or you're a shill or you don't care about children, that I'm going to go to hell, right? All these things being said, but understand there's the anonymity of the social media platforms that allow them to do this. People will do things with anonymity that they would never do face-to-face. And I know some of that's eroded with face-to-face contact, but this really, you need to be mentally prepared, but you also need to look at these resources, which will take you through this process. One more click, please. So to recap, with the right preparation and defense and learning how to clean up if there is an attack, you truly can get through any of these. And when you know you have a team, thousands of people there to support you, you can thwart these attacks and even avoid these attacks altogether. I will tell you that we have multiple examples, including ourselves, that if you are the victim of a large-scale attack, but you rally the troops, you stand by your posts, you don't pull it down, because that's ultimately what they want. Again, you do what you feel most comfortable doing. But if you have a team at your back and you do all these things and you stand by the post that is public health information, something that will help other people. And if you stand by that and weather the attack and have banned all these people, you come out of the other side as a super advocate. And I will tell you, we've re-demonstrated this, not just with our group, but if you remember Nicole Baldwin, who did the TikTok dance, or Brad Bigford, who's a nurse practitioner in Idaho, they are amazing advocates, having been attacked, massive attacks, because they had these resources of shots heard behind them and other people helping them too. But now they can do so kind of free of these attacks moving forward. Next clip, please. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for listening. I'm truly passionate about this. I am absolutely thankful beyond belief that we were able to team up with the Public Good Projects, and invite you to check out all of the Public Good Projects resources on vaccines. And please check out the Shots Heard site, and follow me on TikTok if you want to see me dance or sing sometime, or on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wolin. And now I think we're going to transition into the Q&A. And so, Erica, I know you've been doing a very diligent job in the Q&A, but I want to bring some of these questions to repeat in case people missed them in the Q&A section down at the bottom. So first, can Project Vector trace down to the county level?
Yeah, so Project Vector, the insights specifically are available at the regional level according to US Census regions. We do provide the ability to actually review the data through dashboards, and those dashboards are provided at the state level. So while we do have the potential to go to the county level, given the fact that we're monitoring data across the entire United States, our insights are at the regional level and our dashboards are at the state level. However, I will say that when we find information about maybe a specific county that's being mentioned, particularly for the legislation aspects, we do talk about the counties. So if there is perhaps a rally going on in a specific city or a state capital, we will mention that in our insights. So we do reference those when they are relevant, very often around the legislation pieces.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then I think the next one is probably for Dr. Smizer. Can you talk a little bit about how PGP has been working to activate local activists and trusted voices on social media in different communities?
Yeah, so we had begun this work prior to the pandemic around seasonal flu vaccines. If you can remember that far back, that's really what public health was concerned about at the time when it came to vaccines was flu vaccine uptake, and then measles outbreaks that were occurring at the time, and then just general like routine immunization like HPV vaccine uptake and things like that. So that's where we were focused too, and we were looking at vaccine hesitancy data. And it was really clear that if people, in addition to hearing more from physicians, if people heard more from their neighbors, from community members, people that they viewed were like them, that somebody you could run into at the grocery store, just your average everyday people, that if you got enough of those people together and they all shared true information, where to get vaccinated, why they were getting vaccinated, their experience with vaccination, that was going to increase vaccine confidence. And so that's been funded by Kaiser Permanente for going on 4 years now, and it's led to increased flu vaccination rates and increased vaccine confidence in the communities where we have networks. We've built networks of hundreds of people who share really specific messages about their own experiences getting the flu vaccine. When the pandemic hit, we scaled up that work pretty dramatically. So present day, PGP runs a number of very large, we call them influencer networks, but they don't really consist of famous people. They tend to consist of people who just are have influence within their social network where they live, at most in the state that they live in. And these are thousands of people that come together and agree to push out important public health messaging at a kind of a regular cadence. And they also, most of them understand, most of these networks exist, that they understand that they have a role in pushing back against misinformation and disinformation too. They want to know when misinformation is circulating in their community, and they want to be able to help. And that's one thing that we have seen really clearly during this pandemic. It's a silver lining of the pandemic, of this horrible collective experience we've all lived through, that Americans, regardless of their background, part of our culture is we want to help. We want to help, we want to volunteer. And it's really, really hard during a pandemic when people in public health are saying, social distance yourself, stay at home, wait for us to tell you what to do. There's friction that's caused between those two things. To a lot of people, it feels really un-American. If there's a flood, I want to be able to fill sandbags. If there's a fire, I want to carry water. I want to help my neighbor. So give me a way to do that. What we found is when we have been running these large networks of influencers, it's been really easy to get people to sign up and to volunteer. People really want to, and that wasn't the case in 2019 and earlier. People took more, it was more of a conversation about what is public health and why do you want to work with me? And now everybody gets it, and they really want to join, and they're really eager to know what to say. People want to help. And so our job, in a sense, has gotten easier. And we found that we run an influencer network for UNICEF across a number of countries that has the same mission. So we're seeing it regardless of where you're talking about. Everybody, everywhere wants a way to help. And there's a lot of potential there. Every city health department could have their own network. Every state could have their own network. Every hospital system could have their own network. I think it's about those trusted voices and that collective impact of everybody saying the same thing. So Todd got everything started with these networks of physicians, and that work has to continue because we've made only a small dent in the number of physicians that are out there that could be using their voice more. And that is also true of average everyday people too. There's a lot of work to be done there.
Absolutely. And then, so I'm not sure who's best to answer this next question, so have at it if anyone is confident. I'm curious, so what's the best strategy to use when it comes to bots? Like, is there a way to tell which or how many attacks you receive are from bots? And then how do you respond to bots versus real trolls?
We didn't deal with too many bots, so I will defer that answer.
Do you want to take this one, Erica, or should I?
You can go for it, and I can add.
So bots are a huge problem. It's a real thing. They are deployed every minute of every day to manipulate stock prices, to spread misinformation, to quickly purchase things on online shopping platforms. Bots are neutral. They're neither bad nor good, and there's lots of good uses of bots too. If you want to change your Southwest Airlines flight, it's a bot that's doing that for you. So there are ways to identify bots depending upon the site that you're talking about. The technology behind bots is different for every site, every platform that bots are on. Like a Twitter bot is different than a bot that's active on Facebook, for example. But there is technology to help you in the process of identifying them. Some of it's proprietary, and there are also free versions as well. We do a bit of that work ourselves at PGP, and there's some really great research done on bots as well. I would say a big problem that we just have in general in the public sector and public health or healthcare, community organizations, wherever you fall, is the knowledge about how to identify bots and what to do about them is not within our field. The most of the research there is in comes from places that study propaganda or influence campaigns or computer science and technology spaces. So we're learning as we go, as has been. There's a lot of knowledge transfer that still needs to happen there. Todd, it looked like you were going to say something.
No, I'm sorry. There's just a lot of questions I saw here, but I was going to try and stack a couple together, but I didn't want to jump in on the bots. Sorry about that.
It is. I'll just conclude by saying it is possible to get to discern within a degree of confidence whether something is a bot or not. And I will also say because we're here talking about misinformation around vaccines, most of what we see is homegrown. They aren't bots, they're real people. That's the real problem. And then we are seeing, and other researchers have as well, botnets, networks of bots, do grab on to real things that real anti-vaxxers are saying, or real fake news sites are saying, and they'll amplify that. They'll make sure more people see it. They'll keep it alive much longer than it would have been alive. But we're not that our primary concern should be people within the United States of America that are, for their own reasons, creating and spreading misinformation. They're the number one issue as we see it.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I noticed a couple questions are somewhat similar to this topic. How can we work with groups and people who have a very valid mistrust of physicians and some of vaccines and pharmaceuticals? So what's the best way that we can interact with those groups?
I'll start off because I've seen a few questions like that as well. And one thing I will say is you don't always want a white dude up there delivering the message, right? So you want to be culturally sensitive to the communities with which you're trying to reach. And there's lots and lots and lots of data saying that you tend to trust people that you believe look like you and have a shared experience with you. And so I think who's delivering the message is very important. And it's not, and there was another question there, you can't discount it when if somebody's really coming to you with maybe there's something valid. It depends how they're coming at you with that. If they're throwing, this country has a long history of blankety blank, and then starts just attacking you, is not there for a good faith conversation, you shouldn't enter into that. There's lots of strategies that are used to just bleed you of resources and time. But if they're there and there's a civil discourse that can happen, absolutely, that's an appropriate time. But you got to be careful because these attacks can start with these kind of what seems to be an innocent question and very quickly turn sour. And then at that point, I can't say this enough, and you'll see it in the toolkit, you block or you ban and block and hide and delete the comments, because they will part of their job in these attacks is to just overwhelm and then bleed your resources dry.
Got it. Do you have any recommendations for how to handle, a lot of what we've talked about today is the organized vaccine attacks. Do you have any recommendations for handling like less coordinated, more sporadic individual attacks?
Yeah. Again, if it's an attack, and I want to be careful on that, somebody who's hesitant is not an attacker. They're not an anti-vaxxer. If they have a question, even if it's somewhat pointed, and they're scared, but they're asking it, that's the most beautiful thing about this platform. I've had tons of people. Just yesterday, our physician assistant texted me and said, there's a family here who's getting their vaccines because of your TikToks. That was like, it made my heart 3 sizes too big that day, right? So they will come on there sometimes to get real information, because the beauty of this is that they can see you at 12 midnight and ask you a question, and I'll answer that. But again, is it somebody that's hesitant with a real question, or is it somebody saying you're in bed with the government and you're trying to give us all cancer? Done. Like if they're attacking that's where you ban them or block them, hide and delete the comment. I will tell you, because it only takes a little inkling before you start doing some of that. The attacks are sophisticated. Sometimes it's mild and subtle. Sometimes it's overt. But if it's a good faith conversation, absolutely enter into that conversation if you have time.
Excellent. And then I think we have a question, like a live question. Pollyanna, I see your hand is raised. Do you want to ask your question live, or was that by mistake? give it a second maybe to work through some nice technical challenges of Zoom here. Okay. In that case,
There
so
was
in
a,
shot,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there was one question I saw, I think it came through the chat, which was about, are physicians' offices open to working with community-based organizations? The answer is yes, very much so. And particularly now from the federal level, we're being asked much more to deal with community-based organizations over what's called social determinants of health. But if you're a community organization, and in this question, offering COVID vaccine education, talk to the practice, go reach out to them. We work with a ton of nonprofits in our region. I mean, foundations and nonprofits, probably well over 100 that work with our group, or at least that interact with our group. So I hope that helps answer that one question.
Absolutely. I've got, I think we'll probably do 2 or 3 more questions and we'll move into the wrap up. So what does rallying the troops look like for mobilizing against an anti-vax attack? Can you just describe that process, how it gets initiated, everything about that a little bit?
Do you want me to do that? Do you guys want to do that?
I could share a couple examples, but I think if you start, it's probably the best way to go.
Sure. So basically, we have a couple ways. If you're a member of Shots Heard, you're given access, you're considered vetted, and you're inside a closed Facebook group. There's discussions, and so rallying the troops can sometimes be as much as, hey, I just saw this attack going on. And in the Facebook group, they may just tell people, and a little posse of Shots Heard people will go and provide support by counteracting the information, by posting correct information, calling them out, giving support, which is huge, because when you're in the midst of an attack and you see 5 and 10 people showing, hey, you're doing great work and I agree with you, and here's a study that I saw, or this is awesome. I mean, you don't even have to put technical information. You can just be there for moral support. But that's just a little kind of mini activated one. If we say that there's a real attack going on through the Shots Heard website, you can press an alert, and it's kind of dispatched so that all the members get an alert and know to go help, or at least try and be available to this account, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. And so in force, like I said, when we got attacked, we started seeing hundreds of people, either they're just for moral support or health or public health professionals who started bringing their own information and showing data, putting links in, and calling out the crap that was on there. And like I said, sometimes they use some explicatives too, not that we condone that, but if they're going to do it, that's what they do. But it very quickly made the bullies leave, like very quickly. I'll hand it over to you, Joe.
Sure. What I would add is there is a difference. You need to cover the front of the house and the back of the house. So the front of the house is, for example, a number of state vaccine coalitions here in the US have made partnerships with vaccine coalitions in Australia. 2 organizations that really would have no reason to talk to one another, but they're under normal circumstances. But the reason they do is because anti-vax networks are global. And so state vaccine coalitions in the US suffer 24-hour cycles of coordinated attacks from anti-vaxxers, many of which come from outside the US. They're not bots, they're real people. But it's after working hours of the individuals who run the social media accounts for the state vaccine coalition. And so their Australian friends take over the management, the administration of the US social media accounts. And then the US group does the same thing for the Australian groups. Now that's an extreme example. These are vaccine coalitions. They're magnets for attacks from anti-vaxxers. But you can do the same thing when you're getting hundreds of comments every hour, you need people to just manage the volume. That block, ban, delete, and hide takes time. It's a human being who has to click that button over and over again. The back of the house, and Todd alluded to this a little bit, but I want to really make sure it's clear for everybody. Just to say out loud, it's really stressful. It's really stressful when you go through this, and again, they really try and make you feel isolated. You feel attacked. You start questioning whether you maybe have done something wrong, even though you didn't. And it's nasty and mean. And increasingly, they'll do things like they'll try and dox you. They'll try and give personal information about you out there, your home address, the names of family members. They'll attack family members. I've been through this myself. I've had family members dragged into anti-vaxxers' hatred of me, and they've attacked my parents online, for example. So it's stressful, and the back of the house support it's not, you do need the people who are helping you manage your accounts, but you actually just need human beings that know and care about you to check in on you and make sure you're okay, and ask what they can do to help you, and to help you just remember that the world is a big place and most of the people in it are good people. And this thing that you're going through isn't just an acute experience. It's a short-lived experience that if you can make it through, you'll come out the other end okay. But you just need people around you to remind you of that and keep you grounded in why you're doing what you're doing. So make sure you cover both those things, because both are really, really important.
And now we've technically run out of time, but I'm going to run a little bit long just to do the closing. I just want to apologize to everyone that we weren't able to get through all of the questions and answers today. But if we want to continue the discussion, we do have the Learning Community website where you can post on the discussion board, and we can try to answer some of your follow-up questions there. So with the last couple minutes and before you leave the webinar, we really appreciate it if you would complete a brief satisfaction poll, which was just posted. And while you're doing that, we're going to rest on this slide, which lists some of our upcoming learning community events. And so we have a packed week starting on the week of December 13th. And so on the first day, December 13th, we'll be hosting an event focused on the evidence of incentives on changing health behaviors, including vaccinations. And at this event, we'll learn about some best practices for vaccine incentives and how to best incorporate evidence on incentives into your work. Next, the day after, on December 14th, we have a health equity methods to support your communities with Dr. Dan. And so that is an event we are co-hosting with the Association of Immunization Managers and the iReach Learning Hub, which will be focused on health equity and messaging to advance vaccine equity. More details about this event, including a registration link, will be announced very soon. And then on December 15th, we have a webinar to help you get more familiar with the Vaccine Resource Hub. And at that event, we're going to be exploring new enhancements to the website and how best to use it in your work. We hope you can join as many of these events as possible, but if you're not free to join them live, as always, we do post the slides and a video recording after the fact. Thanks once again to all of our speakers for being incredibly generous with their time and sharing their expertise with us today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Take care.